as we welcome the full first line tonight back on the Coach's Parley here on ASTV. I want to thank Harry Mahesh, Mike Stackhouse, Ryan Wood, and of course Sean Mullen joining the show. It's great to have the full line back in action. Good 5-on-5 hockey about to happen. We've got a great discussion for you tonight here, Friday night action on ASTV. Thanks for joining us. We're going to dive right into this. Our boy Ryan Wood back in action. His arm might be a little bit sore. You got one shot. He's got to get shot number 2 coming up. But speaking of taking shots, the OHL hasn't been taking shots, and they won't be taking shots all year. As of this week, they go back into Code Red, Emergency 101, stop the choppers, head to the choppers, all that chopper action. If Arnie was there, would he control the OHL a little better, Ryan? Or what's the plan with we're back in lockdown mode, so clearly there's no junior hockey OHL style happening this year.
Well, I mean, it's tough. Today, well, actually, sorry, not today. It was on Wednesday that it was announced that we would be going into an emergency break. Really, the only thing that you can do in Ontario is golf or run around outside. So that's about it. But in terms of the OHL, I mean, it's been pretty quiet. We had some momentum there about 3 weeks ago where the league was ready to rock, get themselves into bubbles. Players were starting to get called back to Ontario. And actually, I think some of the things that happened was a lot of the players that were starting to get called back provided some resistance to the OHL because the province of Ontario was very non-committal to a season. And a lot of those players didn't want to leave their current situations where they were actually playing hockey to come back to the OHL. So, I mean, if I was a betting man, I truly believe that there was not going to be an OHL season, whether this lockdown occurred or not. And now with us being in the emergency order that has been called here as of now Thursday, I just can't see the OHL being able to play. And a lot of those players that were recalled are still playing in the American Hockey League and playing over in Europe. I just don't see it coming to fruition this year.
We're going to touch on that other league aspect in a second, but Mike, I want to come to you real quick. A full year missing for the players, for the organizations, for the communities, all that involved. How does the OHL come back for a regular season or any type of season, if anything, in the fall?
Well, I think I've said it on this show before. I would tell you that if I was a parent of an elite hockey player, the chances of me letting him play in Canada as a first option is 0. Absolutely 0. And I'm Ontario, Quebec, Western Hockey League, Junior A, whatever it is, 0. And I hate to say that, and that is not to criticize those people that run those leagues or that are involved with those leagues, whether it's be the OHL or the WHL or the Q or pick a Junior A league. It does not reflect on those people and the programs that are in those leagues at all, but has everything to do with governments. And no one could see this pandemic coming, so a lot of parents and families were unprepared, and their hockey playing children were caught and left out in the cold. I can tell you they will not be caught again. They will not. And that's what will happen in the fall. You're still gonna have, if these leagues get off on schedule, you're still gonna have some good players. But I believe that some of your more elite players that have options where they have more than one league saying, hey, we'd like for you to come play, those options absolutely have to be Europe or the United States, because you can't trust what's going on in this country. You just can't. And it's not the fault of the Ontario Hockey League. It's not the fault of the Western Hockey League or the MJHL or the SJHL or the AJHL. It's not the fault of those commissioners or the organizations that are involved. It has everything to do with the governments that are involved. And if I was a parent, no chance. If I've got more than one option, there is no chance that the number one option is going to be in this country.
Harry, give me a little word on this. I mean, is there blame on Hockey Canada at all for not being prepared or not having a plan to discuss this at least with the federal political, provincial political programs that are in place?
I don't know if blame's the right word. Like, to shift away from that question a little bit, and speaking of Hockey Canada, the U18 tournament's about to get started here. I'd be curious to see what it looks like when a lot of those guys selected from out east, the Ontario area, who haven't really been playing, who got selected to those teams, what they look like. I mean, the Americans have been playing, all these other countries have been playing. This could be that first little glimpse of, okay, here's a country that hasn't been really doing a whole lot of hockey in the last 5-6 months versus teams or countries that have been. So I think before, you could say blame or whatever, maybe Canada walks into this tournament, dominates, and Hockey Canada's feeling good about themselves and can justify everything. But if we go there and get spanked, then, we'll see kind of what everybody's thought is on, kind of holding back. I know a lot of those guys in Ontario, like, for example, this Shane Wright, I've been kind of looking forward to watching this guy play his second year, and the things he can do. Now he'll be at that U18. I don't know what he's been doing in terms of competitive hockey, but now he's going to be on a big stage here and a year away from his draft year. Like, I hope he goes out there and dominates, but I don't know what he's been doing. So yeah, I'm kind of curious to see the timing of this tournament and kind of what Canada's result looks like, and and just kind of go from there. In terms of the OHL starting up again, I'd feel bad for those guys who've been playing in the American League, who would possibly get sent back to the Ontario League. We saw with the Western League players. I know Seth Jarvis was leading his American League team in scoring, I want to say, or was close to it before he got returned. And I don't see a guy like Quentin Byfield being thrilled to give up that paycheck and have to come back to the Ontario Hockey League in whatever form it is. So I think a lot of those guys who've been drafted, and they made the exception to let them play in the American League this year. If you've been drafted, I don't see them wanting to come back. And then obviously there's a handful of guys who aren't doing nothing who would love to be back. So it's just everybody's in a different spot. So I'm just kind of curious to see what it's going to look like after this U18 tournament.
To be clear, I'm not blaming Hockey Canada either. I mean, you got to do what the government tells you to do. Everybody's handcuffed in that regard. So, it's just, you got to look out for number one. So if you're a hockey playing family and you've got more than one option to play, don't do it here. And it's not personal really, but you got to look out for number one because nobody else is.
If you're Hockey Canada, who's getting, I think if I'm not mistaken, I looked at the number, I might be off, but I think they're getting $4.6 million in government funding every year. So are you going to go and rock the boat about your $4.6 million you're getting every year to operate as an organization? Or are you just going to sit back and say, tell us when we're allowed to play hockey?
Money talks, and you know what walks.
100%.
But Sean, is that enough money for Hockey Canada to say, yeah, let's follow the lead, or let's be the only country that really is not participating in organized sports, even though we are in the middle, of a situation where people are getting sick more than often? It's too bad Sean has lots to say. We just can't hear him because he's on mute.
Try him again.
He's going to find the button. It looked good. It looked really good. I don't know what's going on. Let's see if he has to unmute himself. Well, he'll leave his pretty face there until he figures it out. But I mean, $4.6 million in terms of government funding is not a lot of money. I mean, the entire province of Saskatchewan got $4 million for its junior programs for this pandemic piece alone. It doesn't sound like it's a lot. Like $4.6 million is not a lot of money for Hockey Canada to be operating money-wise. So I don't know if money talks. I think it's just the fact that they've just been sitting on their laurels, for lack of a better term, not wanting to raise the eyebrow a little bit. Does that make sense?
But I think, honestly, if you look around, like what sport is rocking the boat with the government? Like baseball's not.
In Canada, nothing is rocking the boat.
Right? No, nobody is. So I'm not upset with Hockey Canada at all. I think they might be an easy target because they govern Canada, or they govern hockey in this country, but I'm not upset with Hockey Canada. I mean, if you had the umbrella organizations for soccer or football or pick a sport, and they're constantly fighting to get onto the playing surface, and hockey wasn't, okay, then I probably would pick on Hockey Canada a little bit, but nobody's fighting it. I think that's just the Canadian way. Is just the government says you can't play, everyone says, all right, we're not playing. But you got to understand that in doing that, some of these families that have special players in their households as young men or sons that are 14, 15, 16, 17 years of age, I truly believe, they'd be crazy not to. If you've got more than one option to play, you're not doing it here because you can't trust it.
Hi, Sean. We can hear you now, probably.
I hope so.
Yeah, there you go.
There we go. We got action.
Yeah, again, what I was trying to say is I honestly don't know what anyone could be mad at Hockey Canada about, and if we were, we'd be entirely speculating. We have no idea what the conversations have been like between Hockey Canada and the federal government and the provincial governments. There's no way we can know. And so to say you should advocate harder or shouldn't, I mean, again, we have no idea. All we know is the result. And like I've said before on this show, if you have a problem, and I'm not saying that, I'm not saying one or another, but if you have a problem with the decision, talk to your member of parliament. They're the people that are handling this. And your provincial member of parliament. Your governments are the ones that are responsible for these decisions. I'm not going to place that on Hockey Canada or Hockey Alberta or Hockey Saskatchewan or Hockey Swift Current or any of these people. Ultimately, it's our elected officials who've made these decisions. And whether you like them or not, they're the ones that you need to hold accountable either way. And, I'm less pessimistic than Mike is about where Canadian athletes will play. I mean, we'll see. Next year might be certainly a year where if you're those parents, you're going to have that in the forefront. But I think once things, assuming they do return to normal, if the quality of junior hockey is still as good as it's ever been, they're not going to want their kids that far away from home if they don't have to be. As long as this is actually in our rearview mirror, in my mind.
Well, I can tell you flat out that I know of 10 kids that are Tier 2 Junior A players from Ontario that played in the OHL last year, stuck it out because their teams and coaches told them that they were going to have a season and everything would work out, and nothing did. And they could have went to multiple different opportunities down in the U.S. And now all 10 of those players have already made commitments to not play in the OJ because, like Mike said, they cannot be trusted. And it's not the leagues. It's not. They know the governments can't. And, I mean, it's unfortunate, but it's reality.
Yeah, but that's the people who are immediately dealing with this. And I'm not saying it's not a problem, but I'm saying long-term, am I concerned about it? Not really. Because we're not, I mean, again, I'm making a prediction. I don't know. I assume we're not going to have pandemics every 5 years, so if we get back to a semblance of normal life, I think people are still going to choose to be as close to home as they can if the coaching and, benefits and all that kind of stuff, development is as good as it's ever been.
To jump in there, I get a lot of Americans reaching out to me too. And I was surprised at first, to be honest. And, I get my emails flooded daily with, guys sending resumes, and there's still a lot of Americans that, there's a bit of an aura of playing Canadian hockey, Canadian junior A hockey, like you watch those old time movies and Hockey on the Prairies, like some of those guys, you don't know necessarily, how good they are because they're just kind of resumes and some video, but, they may not even be able to cut it. But, the emails are still coming this way of the border too. So it did surprise me at first, but, I talked to kids from California, from Arizona. I've talked to kids down in, the New York area, like, just putting out feelers to kind of build more contacts and kind of see what they're up to. They're all playing hockey right now. But yeah, they still have that interest to come see what Canadian hockey is all about. So it surprised me, but I guess, yeah, it's not totally, it's not a one-way street where all our guys are looking to go down there. Like, there's still a lot of Americans who don't know what's going on up here that still want to come up.
Should we make a little geography exam for these kids that want to come up north? Like, where is Viking, Alberta? What is the mean temperature in Swift Current, Saskatchewan in January? Or some stuff like that. And let's see if they really want to come back to play. Because it's great to see and hear that there are Americans, that are south of the border that want to come and play that Canadian hockey, because that aura is still available, no doubt. We see the toughness in the dub. We see the skill in the queue, the goaltending in the queue. And like I said, I kind of agree with Sean, like in a long-term 5-year plan, if we have to look that far ahead and we see the progression of hockey, I feel that, our 3 Canadian leagues are still very dominant in producing top quality professional hockey players that will play all over the world.
One thing that can happen, though, and I don't think it's going to be, all of a sudden a flood of all our best players are going to Europe and the States. But where I do agree is that it does expose the value of those programs in the US and in Europe that we've constantly preached to our kids. The only place to go is in Canada. And once enough go to other places and see these are good options too, then you will lose some, because word of mouth will travel and there'll be some that say, well, I'm getting better promises here or better options here, and I've heard it's good. So it does open the door, at least some, but I don't think it's going to be a flood. That's just my mind.
Last word goes to you, Mr. Mike Stackhouse.
No, I was just going to say I was on the road last week. I was listening to, don't ask me why, but I was listening to the Kansas City Royals season opener for baseball. And their play-by-play announcer, they were talking about what's going on around the rest of major leagues on opening day. And he and the color commentator actually discussed the fact that, our listeners might not be aware, but the Blue Jays aren't allowed to play in Toronto. So there's actually quite a bit of Americans, they don't know. A lot of them don't know what's going on up here. Like, as far as they're concerned, it's over. Things are getting back to normal down there, and fans are being admitted into stadiums. Sports, youth sports is being played. So there's a lot of things that are happening up here that would shock the common American.
We will leave it at that for the first period, gentlemen. We're going to come back and we're going to talk about the dub, of course, because we have to. The East and West, or the East and the Central Division are just after their halfway point. We're going to talk about 3 of their key players that have been showing off their skills as they've come back and been allowed to play this 24-game season. So we'll be right back on the Coach's Parlay. Back here on the Coach's Parlay. As you see, we had to switch Sean and Ryan. Ryan had to go for a quick line change. He had to grab some fuel and snacks for the second period, which I'm glad he's taking care of that. I'm going to have him to share them across the border next time. We got mini Oreos. Is he stealing from your kid's lunch or something, or what?
Just Reese's peanut butter cups.
Atta boy. I love it. He's coming out true. I'm trying to remember what I used to snack on the bench. I think it wasn't I think it was pretzels for some reason. Don't ask me why, but pretzels were always my go-to in between periods. But we'll leave it at that.
Add some salt in you, and then fill yourself up with water after.
Oh boy, it's just stories. We could talk about old-time hockey, back in the day. I'm sure we could tell lots of stories to those Americans. Nonetheless, looking at the top 3 scorers in the WHL right now. Connor Bedard, who's the youngest. Peyton Krebs, who comes back from his AHL Vegas Golden Knight affiliate. And Dylan G. Gunther from the Edmonton Oil Kings, who's had a tremendous start to his division. Those 3 players are showing off some talent, boys. But for me, the biggest surprises out of the East bubble where Brandon right now is leading the East Division as top sport, which is kind of impressive when you consider PA is there and Winnipeg is close by. Harry, have you had a chance to check anything on? If so, what's surprising you? Do you like the 3 goal scorers? Are you happy with the goaltending? Is it just the overall excitement to be able to watch great junior hockey, like these up-and-comers? Like, what's exciting about this?
I'll be honest, like I kind of tracked like the top teams, the top players. It's hard to kind of do a deep dive. I mean, I just seeing those names is nice, and like it's just, to be honest, to see a guy like Connor Bedard, to finally have a guy like that out west. I don't know why, just you kind of feel like a little bit more connected. Dylan was a part of the CSHL, so I've actually got to watch him around the rinks for the last couple of years, even before he was in the Western League. And that's a name you hear from the time he's 14. So it's kind of nice to see that guys who were recognizable names when they were 14, 15 were able to kind of maintain it. Coaching younger players, as I have the last couple of years, it's nice to see that a kid can kind of maintain that status, especially out west here, where it just seems like we've had big names before. I remember Tyler Benson was a bigger name kind of when I was still playing, and he was tearing it up, and he's still a second rounder to the NHL. No slight on him, but it just, I kind of want to see one of these guys step into the NHL at 18 and light it up. It just, being out here, you just feel a little bit more connected to them. And Peyton Krebs, obviously being with the Ice, and like he's one of those guys who came back from the American League. Obviously didn't skip a beat, and I'm always curious to see what guys like that feel like coming back. I mean, you're getting paid and you're playing pro hockey. Now you're back in Regina in a bubble. I'm sure he's just being a teenager and having a good time, but it's nice to see that they come back and kind of don't miss a beat. So like I said, I kind of just track the top end guys and players I see, but hockey looks good, and it's just nice to see they're playing every other day. It must be great for those guys.
Mike, would you have a player come down and get more touches on the puck, playing the PK, the power play, more time on ice, or would you rather stay up in the AHL, collect that paycheck, and still sit in the bottom 6 of a lineup?
Depends. I think depends
Did
on.
I just stump Mike Steikhouse for the first time ever on this show?
I think it depends. I think it depends on the player. I think some guys are better playing up, and some guys, their skill is improved if they're playing major junior. I look at a guy like Cole Perfetti, who would be in the OHL, and that's one for me that I think, that's interesting, because I think he's got 10 points in 20 games with Manitoba. He's, by and large, I think a top 6 guy, for them, or they're playing him as a top 6 guy, whether he's ready for it or not. I would be inclined, I haven't watched, but I just think, if you've got 10 points in 20 games and you're battling, you're probably better suited to keep playing in the A. But if you're struggling, I think you're better off in going back to junior and playing junior. But I think once you're up, it's almost like as an academic, if they used to have kids skip grades. I mean, if all of a sudden they send you back to where you're supposed to be, it's not the same anymore. So I think once these guys that are playing up and playing pro hockey, I think by and large, I would prefer to keep them there. Unless they're really struggling, and the only reason that you've got them playing in that situation is because there's nowhere else for them to play.
Sean, give us your intake on how great Connor Bedard will be, and are there other 15-year-old? I mean, Moose Jaw's got a 15-year-old as well. I forget his first name. His last name's Jagger. He had a pretty stellar goal this past week. Are these guys shining in all the right directions?
Well, I'll answer that. First, I wanted to say in terms of the teams, just an observation I had, and I think some reality would bear that out. When you've gone a long time without playing, without a chance to build chemistry, with rosters that are completely mixed up with new people. Some of the teams that have an established identity and have built that with their current players and with the players in their systems are the ones that are having a lot of the success. You mentioned Brandon. Is Brandon a surprise? Well, Brandon's had, and I know they have new ownership, but they built an established identity there for a long time. I look at Edmonton, Medicine Hat, the Everett Silvertips. I mean, they have one of the most obvious identities in the Western Hockey League. They've allowed 10 goals in 9 games so far.
Yeah.
I'm not entirely surprised that some of these teams that have sort of built themselves on that identity are having success because it's easier to jump into that when it's been, locked in for such a long time. As for the individual players that you're mentioning, I mean, it's been a playground for young talent. Connor Bedard right now is doing things no other underage player has ever done. And what that means for his future, we don't know, because I do believe that it's a little easier to score in that East Division hub than it is in typical Western Hockey League action. How much? I don't know. And the reality is he's behind the league leader in points and goals as a 15-year-old, which is absolutely absurd. He's +8 on an awful team. His face-off percentage is just a hair below 50. I mean, he's playing a man's game as a 15-year-old. So how good is he? I didn't get to watch all the 15-year-olds at the same time, but he's outperforming guys like Connor McDavid and John Tavares at the same age. Will he be better than them as he develops? God knows, but it's exciting to watch someone come up that way. You mentioned Jagger and Moose Jaw. I mean, I can point out a guy right in our backyard in Swift Current, Matt Ward, is close to leading the league in assists as a 16-year-old rookie. There's lots of young guys that are having a real time off the hop in this hub. I don't know why, but I also think there seems to be a little more room for skilled players playing this game. Is there some less desperation and physicality because there's no playoffs? I don't know. But I feel like the young guys are having a little more success right off the beginning than they typically do in the early stages of a Western Hockey League season.
Ryan, touch on that real quick, because we've mentioned it in previous episodes about not playing for Memorial Cup this year because we don't have that in place. But at least after this 24-game season, have a divisional champion per se, or have some sort of award at the end of the tunnel. Or is it okay just for the players to finish this season knowing that they've left everything on the ice and they've had their best skate forward game in and game out, and they've really done all they can do before a draft season or to work on upcoming draft seasons for them?
Well, I think the games that are getting played out west right now are so crucial because I think the kids are playing for paychecks right now. I think that they're trying to figure out, where they're going to land when it comes to the draft eligible players. The ones that are, bubble guys that have been drafted in the later rounds are trying to prove to those teams that, they have value. And then there's some older undrafted players that this is their last kick at the cat. So a lot of these guys are playing for draft spots and paychecks. So, I mean, is it nice to win your division? Of course it is. But I think that a lot of these teams a lot of them are, from a financial standpoint, are excited for these guys to be showcased, because if their players get drafted, it means financially they're going to get kickbacks. And those kickbacks are going to help them through this crazy COVID times where they're losing out on so much revenue, right? So, getting those games in is important for those guys and for the organizations to hopefully get some more players drafted from their teams, which will in turn help them financially.
Do you think too, though, like when you talk about those guys are going out there and playing for paychecks and playing for their future, and they're always doing that to a degree, but when there's less on the line with your team success, are you just even subconsciously a little more focused on your own game than in doing everything you can to make sure there's a win that night? Because it's not the same level of what's up for grabs. That's why teams play a whole different game when it gets closer to playoffs and spots are on the line, and then it's a whole different game again in playoffs. So, I think guys are working hard. I think they're giving everything they can, but it's a different kind of thing. And I wonder if that's why there's maybe a little more room out there for skilled guys right now.
I think the coaches are probably coaching more than they ever have been, just because the close quarters, and there's probably just these guys are probably in meetings all day. Like, what else are they doing? So, I think it's really going to work on the players' overall IQ of the game. Just your coach is down the hall from you for 2.5 months, and they got all the assistants. So, yeah, like I think that there's no championship, but I think the coach's message is like, hey, we're here for a team, and we're about the team. And normally you'd go to your billet's house and forget about your coach for the night, but you're probably hearing that at every team meal. So it's probably hard to get away from the coach's message more than ever. So and I guarantee the coaches are preaching team. So it should be wearing off. I'd hope.
Everybody's competitive. I mean, if you're an elite level athlete, it doesn't matter what sport you're playing. I mean, I know you're not saying these guys are mailing it in, Sean, but I mean, every night when they step foot on the ice, I think a lot of them probably appreciate the fact that they're even having the opportunity to play hockey, which then in turn forces them to even want to get out there and work even harder. And I know that if I was in that situation, that's how it would be for me. I mean, I can't speak for those guys, but that's just my opinion on the matter.
I think with hockey is like the ultimate team sport, right? Like, I mean, I'm just, like listening to Sean talk, it almost reminded me of, you get a baseball pitcher who says, I gave you my 5 innings. I'm not going back out there for a 6th and a 7th and putting my arm at risk. Go get a reliever and good luck. Hopefully you win. And the pitcher will often, head to the clubhouse and get a shower. He won't even watch the end of the game, right? That's just baseball. That's how those guys are. Whereas hockey has just always been the ultimate team game. You sacrifice personal accolades for the betterment of the team. So I think Sean is onto something when he says, okay, we're not playing for a championship. The players know that. And the players also know that, yeah, they're playing for paychecks. And I think there probably is a little bit more motivation to personally do well, not because you're not a team guy, but because you think, okay, well, our team success doesn't necessarily matter as much as it normally does, but my success matters. So you still end up getting to some degree team success by you're just thinking about it in a different way.
It's indirectly related. I think when you think about personal success, indirectly relates to the team success, because I mean, we always think of hockey being the team game, but if you're always concerned about the player being worth about himself and fixing himself, making himself look great, but he's doing that for the team as well indirectly. And as much as I want to say that the players are having a little more freewheeling, a little open space, like you said, Sean, are the players indirectly playing for the health of the league now and looking to address the idea that we need to, show this product off, the talent that is here indirectly, so that upcoming years we can still see success and not monetary wealth, but wealth of the league to begin and increase?
I don't think players think about that at all.
No.
They're not worried about that at all? They don't think about that? Is that an owner's perspective maybe? I mean, I'm sure like 17 kids don't think about that. They're more worried about their PS4s and when they get to have their morning skate and when can they sneak around their coach so he's not looking kind of thing. But are maybe the owners thinking like that? I
doubt there's an owner going to their coach, hey, you got to open it up so that our product looks better. I don't think so. But like I said, I think it's what we're speaking on. Like, think of a guy coming up the left side 30 seconds into a shift, and he sees a small opening, but how good is it? And if you're in a 1-0 do or die game, you're just going to get it deep and change. And in this scenario, maybe you're like, I'm going to go for that opening because I need to show myself here right now. That's the kind of thing I'm thinking of. Just those slight little differences that may lead to more offense, more open, less lock it down type scenarios in this hub, because as a team, there's a little less on the line, and as an individual, there's more.
I agree with you on that, Sean. Yes.
Yeah. And the hockey mentality is just so different. Like I look back at, Kurt Schilling with the bloody sock. Well, most hockey players, that's not even a story, right? Or Matt Harvey. I remember, for baseball fans, Matt Harvey, when the Mets brought him out for the 8th inning, it was like, oh, what are they going to do? Is this the end of Matt Harvey's career? They're going to blow out his arm. Well, you wouldn't even talk about that in hockey, right? Because it's a team game.
Yeah. I can only think of Lawrence Taylor coming off the backside and crushing Joe Theismann as probably being the only injury that's caused dramatic significance to an NFL game. Just saying. But that's probably just before my time, too.
Well, there's been lots.
I know there's been lots. I'm pulling out that one of the way back burger. But, you talk about, football, I think, more of a team game than baseball. But for hockey players, like I said, they'll get their teeth knocked out, and 10 minutes later, chiclets are, not even worried about. They're just put on ice, and they put the mouth guard back in. They're on the bench.
Yeah. So. Yeah. But even football, right? Like you'll hear the pro guys, especially running backs now. They'll say, well, my shelf life isn't long. I'm sitting out. You're going to pay me $10 million. I'm not playing, period.
Yeah.
And they make no secret of the fact that it is, totally, a me decision as opposed to a team decision. And so I've always viewed hockey as being the one sport where it doesn't matter. The team comes first. And so when Sean said, now you've got, those little things where it's like, okay, I don't want to put my team in a bind here if I try and force this issue on this one particular play. That's usually how you would think. But just a little, there's going to be the odd time, and I think Sean's right, where it's like, okay, well, you know what? I don't want to cost my team the game, but if I do cost my team the game, I know that that's a mistake I'm probably not going to make again. And at the end of the day, did it cost us a playoff spot? No.
Yeah.
So try it.
Well, you know what, Mike, I agree with you totally, but I hate to say that I think even hockey players in the NHL, it's all about the brand. You see guys strategically sign contracts are saying, well, Taylor Hall got the $8 million because he knew he'd get traded to contender at the deadline. You know what I mean? So it's like he goes and puts his time. He's having a horrible season. He'll still maybe in 3-4 days from now be on the Leafs. And I agree with you. Like I still think hockey's still the ultimate thing, but I coach junior hockey guys who are already working on their brand, and it's tough to hear some of the conversations. But I just think every human being is it's a little bit more me than ever before. But yeah, hockey is still the more of the ultimate team game. But I don't know if I like the direction it's going sometimes either.
I would say too, a difference with football, in particular at the pro level, is the guarantee versus non-guarantee contracts, right? So in hockey, if you've signed a 6-year deal for $50 million, you're getting your $50 million. In football, you could sign a 100-year contract and they'll cut you tomorrow. So they've created a scenario where those guys have to consider themselves mercenaries because that's how they're treated. Football was more like how we perceive hockey. I mean, those guys notoriously would go and play hurt and not care and wear their heart on their sleeve for their uniform. But the second that one of those guys' play slips a little bit or they have an injury and they're cut and they're gone and they get nothing, they're not going to have that attitude towards their teams anymore. So they've fostered that environment. It's their own fault as far as I'm concerned.
It's true.
Ryan, you want to add one last thing before we move into the third?
No, I'm good. Let's move on to third period.
Third period action coming up. We're going to go back into a little bit of a Wayback Machine. It's not going to be one of the most upbeat, positive discussions to have, but we are going to pay homage to what this week meant to the Saskatchewan Junior Hockey League 3 years ago and the tragedy that occurred for an unfortunate incident here on Coach's Parley. quite the healthy discussion, gentlemen, the first two periods of action. I appreciate it very much, as we all do. Thanks for watching here on ASTV. The last period's discussion. My hockey stick has been on the front porch all week. Gentlemen, how about yours?
Yeah, I wish I was wearing a green shirt, actually. That's the one thing I kind of missed the boat on today.
Yeah, Ryan's sporting the green. I know Mike and Sean have posted many things on social media. Sean, I saw yours as well. Big time. I mean, a couple of words each from you two gentlemen, because you were right in the thick of it 3 years ago. And just remember what it was like, where you were kind of thing, and how tragic that information was when you first heard it.
Sean can go first.
It was game one of the Moose Jaw Swift Current second round series, which was the most looked forward to playoff series of that year in the Western Hockey League. I mean, Regina became a part of that after the deadline, but Moose Jaw and Swift Current went head to head the year before, went to 7 games. Swift won. They both took a step forward. They were the two teams that everyone expected to contend for a title coming out of the East, 90 minutes apart. All eyes were on that series. Everyone was so excited for it. And we get to the rink, and all of a sudden these murmurs start. And you just started walking around the press box in the upstairs area, and as people were starting to hear, every face was white as a ghost. And we all started sort of to talk to each other and rely on the sources we each had. I had a colleague who was close to the broadcaster, Tyler Bieber, who was frantically calling him. And so I remember thinking, sitting in the press box, having a conversation with Kelly Rempel, like, how do we call a hockey game today? How do we go and broadcast a hockey game and be excited? Like, I don't feel right. And it just, I remember that conversation. I remember the faces. I remember the shock and panic and the horrified hush and murmur in the arena. And I have zero recollection of the entire game. A game that we were all looking forward to for months. And I know Swift lost, and I know nothing else about it because it didn't matter anymore. And from there, learning how, like, Mateo Gennaro on the Broncos, his best friend was in the bus crash and died. He's playing on the ice, doesn't know, comes back to the dressing room, finds out. Like, just those personal stories that just rip your heart out. And the next, few days and weeks, the thing that stands out in a positive way was how much we as a hockey community first, and then as a country, united instantly. Everybody came together for each other. The support was overwhelming. We mourned together. I've never seen anything quite like that, the response. And, individual responses. Some of the pros that went to Humboldt, I think, just because I got to know him, of Dean Brockman, who was the coach in Humboldt for all those years from there, just got fired by Saskatoon. And as soon as he heard, picked himself up, went out there, and he was offering on the ground support. Just as one example, like the amount of people that showed their best selves in response to maybe the worst day I can imagine in modern hockey history was the one bright light that came out of such a miserable thing.
I don't care to talk about it, really, to be honest. I had some personal connections with some of the people involved, namely Darcy and Mark Cross. I knew as a player, and then as an assistant coach. And Logan Schatz was a young man who I'd gotten to know just from his ability as a hockey player, and a really good hockey player. I was on the highway. It was a beautiful day. And I got a text message from Bill Chow saying, "Hey, Mike, if you could just tweet the game in Nipawin is canceled tonight." And I phoned him. I said, like, "It's not snowing. It's a beautiful day. Why is it like I can put this on Twitter for you, but like, what's going on? Like, it's a beautiful day." And he said, "Oh, you haven't heard?" And I said, "No." So he told me, I knew right then that it was going to be every bit as bad as what was indicated. I also had, just, I guess, with, I don't know who I am or whatever, but I had connections with some people that work in police that were up there, and I was hearing from them, and I knew it was bad, and I knew it was bad that right away, and then as stuff is coming out, and it's almost unbelievable. People would say, "Oh, well, like, you mean they're not okay?" I'm like, no, they're not okay. And I mean, and those of us that know where certain people sit on buses when you're involved in games and stuff like that, and guys are constantly, a trip from Humboldt to Nipawin, guys are walking around the aisle, they're getting changed, they're getting dressed, the coaches are sitting at the front of the bus. And I remember Bill had said, I've tried to call Darcy and there's no answer. I said, "You're unlikely to get one." And I think, for me, over the course of time, it was just sort of one of those things that it was great to see the hockey community come out and respond the way that they did. But my way of dealing with it was I couldn't watch it. I couldn't watch the coverage. I just didn't want to. And I guess that was just my way of dealing with that, because a lot of these guys, and even some of the other players that are involved, I've at least interacted with a lot of them personally once or twice. I don't want to say I know them, but just because of what I do, I interact with a lot of those guys. And so, they're, and I got a son that's the same age as those kids. And so you can quickly relate to what's going on. And it's not hard to sort of put yourself in the shoes of the parents, and what they all have to go through. And then I think too, as I'm 46, so I'm to the point where, and I think I maybe said on this show before, when I kind of broke into junior hockey at a bit of a league office type level, I was younger than a lot of the coaches. Well, now I'm older than most of the coaches. And so those coaches will talk to me in a way that because I'm older, and so they'll confide in you a little bit more. And the one conversation that I'll never forget, and I'm not going to name him because it's not fair, but I remember he said, "Mike," he said, "my first game as a head coach," he said, "when the bus pulled away and we went on that first road trip, it was a beautiful day. But," he said, "something came over me that made me think, wow, I'm responsible for all these people on this bus. They're my responsibility." And he said, over the course of the next few months and a couple of snowstorms, he was actually overwhelmed with that thought, and especially with, how the players behave behind you, because they don't have a care in the world. They're not worried about anything. And he remembers being a player himself and having that same mindset. You can't see 2 feet in front of the bus, but what do you care? You're a hockey player. The bus driver's got it under control. The coach has got everything under control. It's all good. And as a coach, he was sort of reliving some of that, and it became too much for him. And he ended up for a number of years still coaching, but dealing with a tremendous amount of anxiety, and had to seek professional help to deal with his anxiety. And I think just even within the SJHL, that opened up a discussion amongst the coaches. And then we come to find out that they actually have all felt the same way at some point or another when it comes to that sense of responsibility and the fact that you've got 20 to 25 young people, ages 16 to 20, and they're yours, right? And some of these coaches, I mean, Harry's not that old. Some of these coaches are 28, 29. They're not a lot older than the players, but those boys are your responsibility. And it's heavy. It's a lot to handle, especially when real life hits you the way that it hit 3 years ago.
Harry, do you recall where you were roughly 3 years ago this week?
Yeah, actually, it feels like it was yesterday. I was home in Alberta, and my brother just sent me a text. Hey, there was a junior team that was in a bus crash. It sounds like it's bad. So the first thing I did was Twitter, right? And I just remember it was like every 20 minutes, 3, 5, 7, and you're just, it was just, the weirdest part about that is I just got hired on the Pilot-Mound, and I was driving through Saskatchewan 4 days later. And I've done that drive probably 30 times in my life, from Calgary to Manitoba and back and forth. And it was just, I almost didn't want to go. Like, it was nothing in my life, I guess, had happened that I was so close to. I've spent hours on a bus, hundreds of hours on a bus. And since that, that night, I've gone from Manitoba to BC down to Idaho, like through Montana, like hundreds and hundreds of hours on the bus since then. I have never been fully comfortable. And, when I was in Pilot-Mound, Stoney, he's one of the best bus drivers, best people ever. I remember going through Montana and those winds, and he had 2 hands on the wheel and he was leaning back the other way. And I almost wanted to tell him, hey, just pull over. Like, let's just go anywhere on the road, because like Mike was saying, like, they're responsible for everybody. And I was that guy on the back of the bus playing cards, looking through, oh, that was Lex to be the driver. Oh, there's snow, and not a care in the world. And like Mike was saying, like, guys sleep under seats, guys lay down in the aisles, and guys are stretched out across. And it just makes you like, I don't know. It just, there is an intersection that I don't look twice at when I'm driving down the highway. Driving through Saskatchewan has never felt the same, and I've done that drive probably 12 times over the last 3 years. And it just, being a coach, and every time you get on the bus, and now I'm at the front, and it's kind of, you're scanning the road, and I'm very much a backseat driver, and it just sucks. And I don't know. I guess I'm uncomfortable talking about it too. And we had Hockey Night in Canada in Winkler back when I was a player there in 2008. And Ron McLean did this big intro about, what it means to be on the bus of a junior team. I think his exact line was like, you can't buy a seat on this, you got to earn it. And he walked up and down the aisles, and he interviewed a guy, and he went back to me. And the night before, he was in the building, and I knew he was there. So I was like, I'm getting in a fight. You know what I mean? Like, CVC is here. Like, I'm getting in a fight. I got to get on TV. And sure enough, I got one. And he went back and he goes, oh yeah, you got a bit of a shiner. And sure enough, that little clip made the opening to Hockey Night in Canada. And I had the DVD, and I told my brother, I was like, can you send me that clip? And it's on my Facebook, and it's about 3.5 minutes long. And within that night, like, I shared it, and it had been viewed like 35,000 times. And I was like, I just wanted to share like my small experience of like what the bus meant to me. And one of my best memories of as a hockey player is being interviewed by Ron McLean on the back of the bus. And, I've played a lot of hockey games after that. I've coached, but to me, that was one of the most special things that had happened to me. And the bus, it's just, if you haven't been in junior hockey, you don't understand. Like, you're on the bus with the boys, the old Oilers, the boys on the bus. Like, it's symbolic to junior hockey. And for that to happen, it just changes your mentality. Like, there hasn't been a bus trip where I just never felt the same. It crosses my mind again as you're turning on to number 1. You come up through Carmen and you're going to Portage, and there's that intersection, and I'm doing this, and it's just instinct now, and I don't think it's ever going to change.
I thought I was your highlight to be interviewed by me. I didn't think Ron McLean and I were on the same level, but I'll take a back seat to Ron McLean. It's okay. Ryan, you've been a coach in many different leagues, probably put on a lot of miles, just like all of us. What did it feel like when you first heard this news? And like we've said so many times already, the responsibility as a coach, but also making sure that, you know, the safety of all these players is the first and foremost, you know, responsibility of a coach and on these bus trips.
I hate the bus. I hate being on it every single time that I went on a trip. Was not my favorite part because I wasn't the one driving it. And we had some great drivers when I was coaching in Kirkland Lake. When I was in OCN, we had some really, really scary guys, and wasn't the best. But you know, the Humboldt thing it was a little close to home for me because the year before I got hired to be the head coach and GM in Kirkland Lake in the Northern Ontario League. That summer, I was working at the camp in Vegas for Mike Butters in Globals. And that's where I met Darcy for the very first time. And, you know, I was excited. I'm going to Kirkland Lake. I'm going to, you know, take over this program. And, you know, there's a lot of excitement. And got to meet Darcy because, you know, I didn't have a ton of connections with a lot of Saskatchewan junior hockey coaches. So it was nice to connect with them. And, you know, we worked a couple games on the same bench together and just, well, we hit it off. We had good conversations. We always stayed in touch. You know, I helped Darcy send a couple guys to his camp. And then in return, you know, a few of the guys that he kept around through training camp and into the beginning of the season that didn't quite, you know, didn't quite cut it to play in Humboldt that year. They were younger players. He called me and said, "Hey, I got a defenseman for you." He ended up trading me a defenseman. His name was Quinn Schneidmiller. Comes and plays for me. Plays the year. Was a good little defenseman for him. Played some prep school hockey out in BC. Played in the CSSHL. Plays for me all year. We lose in the second round of the playoffs. He was great for us. It was a good year. April rolls around just before we're doing exit interviews. He's coming back, and my plan was he was going to be my captain for the upcoming year. So, you know, we make the plan. He's going to be my captain because my 20-year-old's done. And so, yeah, we make him captain. Everyone goes home. You know, we're done. I go back home to Barrie, and, you know, my wife and I and a few friends, we take a trip down to Nashville. I'm literally sitting in a concert in Nashville at the Bridgestone Arena, and my phone rings, and it's Quinn Schneidmiller. Quinn's in tears because of all of this that went on. And in fact, Quinn was on the Broncos, and all he kept saying to me was, "That could have been me." And like, you know, it sucks to be traded, and it sucks for everything that happened to those kids. But I mean, that kid was in absolute tears because he was so close to home for him, and he was a member of that team for, I don't know, 15 games. So yeah, it's a pretty tight connection. It's a terrible situation that happened, and the bus for me was never a fun thing to be a part of. I didn't like it, and if there's one thing that I do that really don't miss about being a coach is having to ride the bus. So, but yeah, I mean, you know, it's amazing the community all came together and how it all tied up and how things are going now, and the support that's still there. And I mean, this memory will last a lifetime for everybody. It's always going to be there. And as long as we constantly remember the ones that were part of that squad and we never forget, I mean, we just got to stay humble, strong all the time.
No doubt. Any last words from any of you gentlemen before we conclude this fine, beautiful evening on the prairies in Ontario?
One thing I would say, and you know, I think it's totally fair that the people who are actually responsible feel the weight and burden of looking after these kids. But just in my position, I heard from a lot of friends from across the country after this happened that were like, shouldn't teams change what they're doing? You know, send vans out or whatever the case may be. I mean, studies will show actually bus travel is about 50 times safer than private car travel.
100%.
So people need to understand that too, that anyone that's home being like, well, why do they ride the bus then? It is remarkably safer. But of course, coaches are going to have the weight of that on their shoulders because there's young lives with them and things have happened. I mean, nobody knew that better than Swift Current. And that's, the day I moved to Swift Current, or before I moved, I learned all about it. The 30th anniversary of the 1986 bus crash, somehow the league schedule had us in Regina on that day. I don't know how that happened. I don't think it should have happened, but I knew that the play-by-play broadcaster on that day 30 years before had driven to the game and not rode the bus. And I just was too damn superstitious and drove. But the bus is safe. We're just aware of the risk because of the lives that were lost. We're aware of it, but it is the safest thing for our kids. And on top of that, all the moments just where we came together as a country. One lasting memory for me on heartbreaking but also positive side, I'll always remember coming out of it was, I mentioned Matteo Gennaro. Stephen Wack was his best friend, passed away. A few days later, he scored a hat trick, including the overtime winner, and talked in our post-game show about how there was an angel on his shoulder. So, there are those moments, as horrible and awful as everything was, where you really felt connected to everyone around you, and that was one of them.
Kind of another little tidbit that doesn't have anything to do with the crash, but just the oddity of it all. I believe when the Humboldt Broncos first got going, they decided to call the team the Broncos because Swift Current donated their old jerseys to them.
And to have that happen, and then, to have Dean end up here after too, there's just this weird spiritual connection between the two cities now. Yeah.
It's it really is something, and I hope never again in my lifetime. I really hope never again. And I think the other thing too, just before we go, I think it's human nature to remember the best of people when they pass away. But Darcy was every bit that you heard about him. He was every bit that and then some. And I always wanted to, relay that to people, because I always say, it's certainly polite to remember the good traits in people when they're no longer with us. But Darcy truly was everything that they said and more. And from a hockey point of view, you've probably heard me talk a little bit about it on this show, where I really value character, and I've always said, give me 20 pretty good players, but really good guys, and I'll take my chances against a really high level, talented team that maybe has a few character issues any day of the week. And Darcy was big time into that. And it didn't necessarily mean he had a team of guys with no baggage, but he saw the best in people, and he found a way to get those guys on his team, and he found a way to get out of those kids what maybe other coaches weren't able to get out. And I think probably the best way to sum it up, quite frankly, and it maybe sounds corny or whatever, but he truly loved every single boy on that team. And they knew it, and that's why they knew it, and that's why he was able to get out of them what he was able to get out of them when they play. And that's the thing about that playoff series that a lot of people, kind of forgot about. Talent-wise, they didn't even belong on the same ice surface as Nipawin, and they were pushing them. I mean, that was a game 6 that night in Nipawin that, or a game 5. I think it was game 5. It was 3-1. But certainly it was a game that at Humboldt that they'd been able to, pull that out and win, they're going home for game 6. And a team that's got that kind of character, I've seen it before.
It certainly shows the strength in community in junior hockey and the lessons learned, not only on the bus, but just the camaraderie amongst teams as opponents on the ice, but members of a fraternity off the ice, no matter how many years you've been removed or how many years you're just beginning or days beginning. So truly all our thoughts and memories go to not only just the Humboldt community, but like we said, to the Broncos, to all junior hockey players who have been in that position. And of course, we never want to have that happen ever again. For my panel tonight, I want to thank you all for spending some time with me today on my Friday night, as well as yours. For Sean Mullen, Mike Stackhouse, Harry Mahesh, Ryan Wood, thanks for joining us here on the Coaches Parlay. We will see you guys in a couple weeks. Take care, boys. Enjoy the rest of the season, or next part of the season. We'll be back with some hard-hitting period action in a couple of weeks. Take care on ASTV. See you next time. Bye-bye.